Have you ever been completely convinced you were right, only to later realize you completely misunderstood the situation? Or have you ever noticed how two people can experience the exact same event and walk away with completely different interpretations? Well, that's because your brain is not showing you reality objectively. It's filtering reality. And while those filters help human beings survive, they also distort perceptions in ways most people never realize. So today we're talking about the hidden mental shortcuts, biases, and emotional filters shaping how you experience the world and why your brain sometimes lies to you. Welcome to the Personal Mastery and Growth Podcast, where we explore the keys to unlocking your full potential and living your best life. I'm your host, Jose Johnson. Whether you're looking to make a breakthrough, overcome a challenge, or simply live with greater clarity, joy, and purpose, you'll find the tools and inspirations you need right here. So let's start your journey towards personal mastery and growth right now. Welcome back to the Personal Mastery and Growth Podcast, your go-to resource for practical tips, insightful research, and inspiring stories to help you unlock your full potential. I'm your host, Jose Johnson, and I'm an expert in the fields of mindfulness, mindset, and peak performance, and I'm so excited to have you here with me today. Now, over the past several episodes, we've explored emotional suffering, internal narratives, emotional environments, and communication patterns. Well, today we're taking an even deeper look at the hidden mental filters shaping human perception itself. Because the truth is, human beings are not perfectly objective creatures. Your brain is constantly predicting, filtering, simplifying, interpreting, and emotionally coloring reality. Not because the brain's broken, but because efficiency and survival matter more to the brain than perfect accuracy. And honestly, once you begin understanding cognitive biases and mental distortions, you start seeing them everywhere. In your relationships, in social media, in leadership, in conflict, and especially in the stories that we tell ourselves. So today we're going to explore why the brain filters reality, how negativity bias shapes perception, how confirmation bias reinforces beliefs, how catastrophizing escalates emotional spirals, and why strong emotions can trick us into believing distorted thoughts are objective truth. So let's dive in. Now, one of the most important things to understand about the human brain is this. Your brain is not trying to create perfect reality. It's trying to create an efficient reality. See, the brain evolved for survival, not flawless objectivity. And because the brain processes enormous amounts of information every second, it relies on shortcuts. Now, psychologists often refer to these shortcuts as heuristics. Mental shortcuts help the brain to make decisions quicker, to conserve energy, to identify patterns, and predict outcomes rapidly. And honestly, that's really useful. If our ancestors had to deeply analyze every rustling bush before reacting, well, survival would have been difficult at best. Sometimes reacting quickly kept humans alive. The problem is these shortcuts are not always accurate. Sure, they're efficient, but they're not perfect, which means the brain often fills in gaps, makes assumptions, predicts outcomes, and filters information automatically. In other words, human beings do not simply experience reality. We interpret reality. And those interpretations are heavily influenced by our emotional state, past experiences, conditioning, beliefs, expectation, and cognitive biases, which is why two people can experience the same situation and walk away with completely different conclusions. The brain is constantly constructing reality, and sometimes the construction process gets distorted. Now, one of the strongest filters shaping human perspective is negativity bias. Now, this is the brain's tendency to prioritize potential threat over positive experience. Now, again, this comes back to survival. Your ancestors benefited more from noticing danger quickly than from admiring sunsets for extended periods of time. So the brain became highly sensitive to negative experiences like problems, criticisms, conflict, uncertainty, and of course, potential threats, which means negative experiences often carry more emotional weight than positive ones. That's why one criticism can outweigh 10 compliments, why one awkward moment can replay in your mind for days, and one stressful email can suddenly dominate your entire afternoon. See, your brain treats potential dangers like a VIP guest. It gets priority access. And honestly, social media platforms capitalize on this constantly because emotionally charged content grabs attention more effectively than calmed, balanced content. Outrage spreads fast. Fear spreads fast. Conflict spreads fast. The brain pays attention because the emotional, intense information feels important. Now, this negativity bias by itself is not necessarily harmful. The problem begins when the brain starts building narratives around the negativity. And that's where confirmation bias enters the picture. Now, once the brain notices a potential problem, it often starts scanning for evidence to support the concern. Now, this is called confirmation bias. And honestly, this affects everybody. Once the brain adopts a belief, concern, or emotional narrative, it starts recruiting evidence. For example, if someone believes people don't respect me, their brain may begin selectively focusing on criticism, dismissive behavior, negative tone, or social tension. Meanwhile, they may completely overlook acts of kindness, people who support them, appreciation, encouragement, or any positive interactions. Not because they're intentionally negative, but because the brain filters selectively. Your brain becomes like a lawyer trying to build a convincing case for whatever story it already believes. And once confirmation bias combines with negativity bias, the emotional spiral intensifies. Because now the brain is not only focused on potential threats, it's actively gathering evidence to support them. Now, this is one reason anxiety loops become so convincing. The brain starts treating selective evidence as complete reality. Now, once the brain notices danger and starts collecting supportive evidence, the next step is often magnification. Now, this is where cognitive distortions come into play. Cognitive distortions are habitual thinking errors that distort our perception. And one of the most common is catastrophizing. Catastrophizing is what happens when the mind turns possibility into psychological certainty. So, for example, one difficult email becomes, I'm probably getting fired. One awkward interaction becomes, everybody must think I'm weird. One mistake becomes, I ruin everything. The brain is not only capable of noticing danger, it's capable of emotionally enlarging danger. And once catastrophizing begins, the nervous system activates more intensely. Stress hormones increase, anxiety rises, the body prepares for threat. Now the brain becomes even more alert for additional evidence, which creates a loop. The more emotionally activated a person becomes, the more convincing the catastrophic narrative starts feeling. And honestly, this is why anxiety spirals so fast. The body begins reacting as though the imagined outcome is already happening. Now, it's important to understand, catastrophizing, it's not stupidity. It's protective prediction pushed too far. Your brain is trying to prepare you for danger, But sometimes it starts predicting emotional disasters that will never actually happen. Now, this leads us into one of the most powerful distortions of all: emotional reasoning. This is when people unconsciously assume if I feel something strongly, it must be objectively true. So, for example, I feel rejected, so nobody values me. I feel anxious, so something terrible must be about to happen. I feel insecure, so I must not be good enough. I feel overwhelmed, so everything must be falling apart. Strong emotions can create the illusion of certainty. And honestly, this is where many people become trapped. Because once emotions become intense enough, the brain stops treating them like temporary states and starts treating them like objective conclusions. But emotions, well, they're not always accurate interpreters of reality. They're influenced by our stress levels, exhaustion, conditioning, past experience, nervous system activation, beliefs, and cognitive filters. Now, this does not mean emotions should be ignored. Emotions contain very important information, but emotions are not always complete truth. And this is where mindfulness becomes incredibly valuable. Mindfulness helps create awareness between the emotion and the interpretation attached to the emotion. Instead of unconsciously believing every thought and emotional reaction, you begin asking, is this objective reality? Or is this my brain filtering reality through fear, stress, or conditioning? And that question alone can completely interrupt an emotional spiral. Now, here's the important thing. The goal is not to eliminate bias completely, because that's impossible. Human beings will always have assumptions, blind spots, emotional filters, and cognitive shortcuts. The goal is greater awareness, because awareness creates psychological flexibility. It creates curiosity instead of certainty, reflection instead of automatic reaction. And it helps us recognize when the mind may be exaggerating, filtering selectively, catastrophizing, or emotionally distorting reality. But now the important question becomes, how do we actually manage these biases in real life? Well, one of the most powerful things we can do is slow down automatic thinking. Bias thrives in fast, emotional, reactive thinking. Awareness, well, it increases in slower, reflective thinking. And this is one of the reasons mindfulness is so valuable. Mindfulness helps create space between stimulus, interpretation, and reaction. Instead of immediately believing every thought your mind produces, you begin observing your thoughts with a little more curiosity. You start asking yourself, is this the objective truth, or is it my brain reacting automatically? And that question alone can interrupt emotional spirals. Another powerful strategy is learning to separate facts from interpretations. Right? So, for example, the fact may be that they haven't responded to your message yet. The interpretation, they're upset with me. The fact could be you made a mistake during the presentation. The interpretation, I'm terrible at public speaking. Now, that distinction matters enormously because many people react emotionally to interpretations as though they are objective facts. Now, another helpful practice is intentionally looking for disconfirming evidence. Now, this directly challenges confirmation bias. Ask yourself questions like, what evidence contradicts my assumption? Am I seeing the full picture? Could there be another explanation? What would someone else see differently here? Now, that last question is especially powerful because perception interrupts certainty. And honestly, certainty is often where bias becomes more dangerous. Emotionally healthy people remain open to the possibility that their interpretation may be incomplete. Now, another important skill is emotional regulation because highly activated emotional states make cognitive distortions stronger. When people are stressed, exhausted, anxious, angry, or overwhelmed, the brain becomes more reactive and more threat focused. Now, this is why sleep matters, nervous system regulation matters, movement matters, mindfulness matters, and even taking a pause before reacting matters. Sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is simply delay interpretations until your nervous system settles. Because the brain often tells very different stories in calm states than it does in emotionally activated states. And honestly, one of the healthiest mindset shifts we can develop is replacing certainty with curiosity. Instead of, this is definitely true, try, this is my current interpretation. Now, that small shift creates enormous psychological freedom. Now, here's something really important. The same psychological mechanisms that can reinforce negativity can also be intentionally redirected in a healthier way. Because if confirmation bias means you tend to find what you consistently look for, then we can become more intentional about what we train ourselves to notice. In other words, if the brain naturally searches for evidence, we can consciously give it better things to search for. Now, this is one reason why gratitude practices can be so powerful neurologically. Not because they magically eliminate problems, but because they retrain attention. Now, personally, one of the practices that I've used is starting each morning by writing, "Great things are happening for me today." Now, some people hear something like that and immediately think, oh, that's just positive thinking. But psychologically, it's much deeper than that. What I'm really doing is setting an attention filter. I'm intentionally asking my brain, look for opportunities, look for progress, look for moments of gratitude, look for what's working. Then at night, the last thing I do is write down all the good and great things that happened during the day. Now, some days the list is long. Some days it's something simple like, I was able to take a nap. But the specific item or counts matter less than the pattern of attention. Because over time, this practice trains the brain, and particularly something called the reticular activating system, or the RAS, to become more aware of positive experiences, opportunities, and meaningful moments that might otherwise be overlooked. The RAS acts like a filtering system for attention. It helps determine what information reaches conscious awareness, which means what you repeatedly focus on influences what your brain starts noticing more consistently. Now, that doesn't mean ignoring reality. It means training attention intentionally instead of unconsciously allowing negativity to dominate perception. Because the truth is, your brain will often find evidence for whatever it's constantly searching for. So one of the most powerful mindset shifts that we can develop is becoming more intentional about what we train ourselves to notice. Because once you realize your brain is filtering reality, you stop blindly believing every thought it produces. And that awareness changes everything. Look, your brain is an incredible tool, but it's not a perfectly objective narrator. It filters reality constantly through survival wiring, emotional conditioning, cognitive shortcuts, beliefs, and past experiences. And while those filters can sometimes protect us, they can also distort perceptions in ways that increase anxiety, conflict, emotional spirals, misunderstandings, and unnecessary suffering. So this week, I want you to begin noticing where your brain is filtering your reality through negativity, assumptions, catastrophizing, or emotional reasoning. And where might greater awareness create a more balanced perspective? Because the goal is not perfect objectivity. The goal is becoming more aware of the filters shaping your perception. All right, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with someone who may need to hear it. And as always, please subscribe, follow, and leave a review because it truly helps us continue reaching more people with these conversations. So until next time, remember, it is what it is, but it becomes what you make it. So make it great. Thanks for tuning in. Before we wrap up, I just want to remind you that the information shared in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional advice or treatment. While the content of this podcast is based on research and personal experience, everyone's situation is unique, and the advice given may not be applicable to all. Always consult a qualified professional before making significant changes in your life. The Personal Mastery and Growth podcast is recorded at the So Good Media Studios located in the Candy Factory, a co-working space in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.